I'm Ryan Leopard, and our listeners might recognize me from our Neutral Voices, a Financial Pillar podcast. I'm the host of that. Today, I'm excited to be here with a couple special guests of mine. But before I introduce them, I want to give a little backstory on how we got to today. I approached our production staff a couple weeks ago with the idea that my daughter had been invited down to Zionsville for the Miss Indiana competition as the little sister of Miss Fort Wayne, Cydney Bridges. How are you doing today?
Good.
You excited to be here today?
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't seen Cydney since she won, have we?
No.
No? Do you have anything to say to her?
What was going through your mind when you won?
Oh,
Great question.
that is a great question. Okay, to be honest, I can't remember the moment. So if you look at the video, I'm hugging Kayla, who's my first runner-up, and I wish I could remember what I said to her. I know what she said to me. Kayla said, no matter what happens, you're always going to be a fantastic mentor. You made a great impact in your city. That's what Kayla said to me. I said something back to her. I have no clue what it was. And then next thing I remember is dropping to the ground, but I don't remember getting crowned at all. The only recollection I have of it is from videos. I don't remember it. I don't even know. It just went out of my mind. So I remember dropping to the floor. Everything else is a blur, and then I remember pictures.
But jumping into your story, you have such a deep, inspirational story, but I would like to begin with your path to Miss Indiana. How did you get started in competing, and what kind of drives you to compete?
On the northwest side of Fort Wayne, they used to have this pageant called the Miss Huntertown pageant, and they had it for a few years, and it was just available to girls in Northwest Allen County. And so I remember I was in third grade, and they came over the intercom, and they had these little pamphlets that it looked like they printed off and just folded for us, and I signed up for Miss Huntertown, and that was my very first experience doing a pageant. And then later that year, my very first Miss America local was Miss Fort Wayne. I was 11.
Okay.
And that was my very first introduction to the Miss America opportunity. And so later the next year, I won a preteen title for the first time, and I got scared to do teen. So I just quit. I just kind of quit pageantry for 5 years.
So this was 12, and then you quit until
17. Mm-hmm. And so when I finally came back, I didn't necessarily come back to the Miss America opportunity right away. I did a few other systems. And then at the age of 19, I won my first Miss title, and that was Miss Fort Wayne on October 26th of 2019, but it was for the 2020 pageant season. And obviously that's when everything got crazy. We got COVID. We didn't have Miss Indiana that summer, so I held Miss Fort Wayne for an additional year and went to Miss Indiana for the very first time in 2021.
Okay.
So that's like the timeline of getting to the Miss Indiana stage. But the biggest reason I did it was, for kids like Chloe, just to have an impact on youth. At the time I was working at the Y, and I remember kids would one kid saw me on the news or something like that, and he was like, "Miss Cydney, are you famous?" And I was like, "What did you find out?" Because I didn't tell you.
Was that Chloe?
No, this was a different.
Somebody?
This was a
Okay,
different
that's how
kid.
Chloe happened too.
This
when we
was
saw
a
you on the
different
news.
kid, and I was like, "How did you find out?" Because I usually don't. That's not the first or usually the last thing I tell them, because I just like the kids to see me as Miss Cydney.
Yep.
But all of them find out at one point or another, and then. But that's honestly why I do it, because I think I have a message, and I grew up with a single mom, and I was very impacted by the mentors, and the older adults in my life. So. Getting to do that now with this title has been a lot.
Yeah. So how many times, I know you mentioned being at Miss Indiana a few different times, how many times have you actually been to Miss Indiana?
So I have been 3 times, 2021, 2022, and then a few weeks ago, June 2023. And each time I kind of went, top 11, third runner-up, and now Miss Indiana.
Okay, so
Cydney, I have a question for you.
Okay.
What was in me that made me want to be your little sister?
What did I see in you that made...
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, so a little background. Chloe and I met at YMCA camp last summer, and actually she's one of the sassiest kids I had. But
facts.
She's
Big
one
facts.
of the she's one of the sassiest kids I had. But she had a lot of spunk to her. And whenever I see a little girl that has a lot of spunk and energy, I like to think about positive ways for that young person to channel their energy. And I felt like the Miss Indiana stage was a great way for that, because that's accepted. People love the sass. People love the energy. And it's not a place where you're going to be told to be quiet or sit down. You get to own that. And so I wanted to give Chloe the outlet to own her sass and own her energy and own her vivaciousness. And so you got to do that. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Cydney, how many times exactly did you compete in the Miss Indiana pageant?
So I competed for 3 times. I got involved in Miss Fort Wayne officially as a Miss at the age of 19. I did Miss Fort Wayne as a preteen. I was 11 years old the first time I ever stepped on the Miss Fort Wayne stage. But when I came back, I was a freshman in college, and I won on October 26th of 2019.
Okay.
And then that was for the 2020 pageant season. And then COVID hit, everything got crazy, and they canceled Miss Indiana that year. So I didn't get to compete as Miss Fort Wayne 2020 until 2021. So that was my first time on the Miss Indiana stage. Came back last summer and then competed for my 3rd time this past June.
Gotcha. So, and what were the finishes? You finished 11th, 3rd,
Yes.
and 1st?
Yeah, so I got called into the top 11 my first year. I was 20. Was I still 19? I was 20. I was 20 the very first time I did Miss Indiana. So I got called into the top 11. Me and my team, KK Coconine, Miss Fort Wayne's teen at the time, also got called into the top 11. And then I came back last year and ended up making the top 5, where I was named 3rd runner-up. And then this year, me and my team we got announced to top 11, and then the night went on, and then they called me to the top 5, and then before I knew it, I was holding hands in the top 2.
Amazing.
It was incredible.
Like I said, I'm a sports guy, baseball guy, and naively, my thought, and I think a lot of probably our listeners' thoughts are around this type of competition is just a beauty pageant. Being there and seeing it live and seeing what those girls go through and the amount of passion and emotion that they put into competing out there gives you a whole new perspective of what
absolutely.
it is. It's not just a beauty competition.
So when I won Miss Fort Wayne last year, I also competed the same. We call ourselves the Fort Wayne Northeast team. So Addison Chatton was also a girl that I spent my whole year with, and she was the first runner-up to teen. So we have the same team, the same prep team. We have all the same appearances, and we won on the same local night. And so the Miss Fort Wayne Northeast team had Amara Nestor in the top 11, Addison Chatton as first runner-up to teen, and then I won. So it was a very successful year for us overall as a team.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give you a chance to also talk about Miss Indiana, the organization, and let us know about what their mission is. Because, like I said, naively, myself, as I'm sure a lot of our listeners who are uneducated about Miss Indiana, Miss Fort Wayne, the competitions, it's just a beauty pageant. So tell us about the organization, because I learned a lot more about that while I was down there watching as well.
So I think the biggest contributor to women is that Miss Indiana and the Miss America opportunity, we are the largest scholarship provider for women in the world. Like when people compete for Miss America, it is like statistically proven that we provide the most amount of scholarships for women in the United States. Okay. And so Miss Indiana in particular is an avenue for women to gain scholarship money in a fun way. But also there's 4 points on my crown, and they represent scholarship, service, style, and success. And each point of the crown is something that we as local title holders, as state title holders, are able to represent. And so it's not just a beauty pageant, because outside of the 1 week of competition, we're serving our communities. We are working to share our message on social media. We are gaining scholarship dollars. We are getting our education. We are entrepreneurs. I'm Emma Schneider, Miss Metropolitan, who was 3rd runner-up, owns 2 businesses. At the age of 21. She owns a very successful cookie business, and a clothing business. Sam Robbins has her own organization. Dina has her own organization and works in politics. We're not just up there to be pretty. We're up there because we have passions and we have purpose. We want to share that with the world.
That's awesome. Now, when you say scholarships, I think of scholarships as in terms of money to go to school with. In your situation, you just recently graduated college, right? Congratulations.
Thank you.
But you run some scholarship money there,
Yeah.
right? So what is that money go for? Is that continuing education, or is that can you do other things with that money that you won?
Yeah, so this year at Miss Indiana, I won about 12,000 in scholarships, and in total I've won about 22 to 24,000, somewhere in between, in scholarship dollars through competing. But I have graduated, so it kind of is just gonna sit there until I go back to school. I have always had a dream of being a nurse practitioner, so it wasn't like I was like NARTS. I can't do anything with it, but it has to go towards education, some type of. But it doesn't have to necessarily be like your school expense. It could be if you need help with housing, if you need help with books, anything school related.
Okay.
It can help with.
Is that something that if for some reason you didn't utilize it, you could donate to somebody else, or does it have to be utilized?
You know,
for
I
yourself?
haven't ever asked those questions, but I would be curious, because I do know it's in my name. It's under Cydney Bridges.
Yep.
So, but I'll probably end up using it at some point, and whether it be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it doesn't go anywhere. So that's a good thing.
Gotcha. So one of the things I also noticed down there was, you and, I don't want to say your competitors, but your sisters, because that's really what it seemed like down there. You spent a lot of time together watching some of those videos. And when you are in a competition and somebody you're competing with wins and you don't, or let's say moves on to the next round, you expect to see some people just like down and, I lost, stuff like that. And watching from the audience, never once did I see any one of those young ladies up there drop their heads, feel any sort of self-pity, sorrow, or anything else for themselves. They were generally happy for the winners, whether it was they didn't make it to the top 11, the top 5, or even you standing there with the runner-up, holding. She was probably just as excited as you, if not more, because you were in shock when they announced that you were the winner. The camaraderie there. Tell me about that. What's that like?
So that's actually the 5th point of the crown. It's invisible because there's obviously only 4 points to my crown, but it's sisterhood. And I don't know if you remember, but that earlier that night, my onstage question was about sisterhood.
Absolutely.
And that is my favorite part of the organization because, when everything is said and done, only one girl wins. But the reason why we all come back is because we laugh backstage so much during the week. We have so many funny videos, funny memories. We all cry together. And the sisterhood is so bonding that by the time Saturday night comes, we are just happy for everyone. No matter if it's us, if it's her, no matter if we're in the top 11. I mean, if you go backstage, there are girls, because they had pizza and cake backstage the whole night. There are girls crowded around the TV, cheering while they're eating, and just like some girls are crying, and it really isn't, people have seen the movie Miss Congeniality, and I got asked, is pageantry anything like the movie Miss Congeniality? And I said, not at all. We are so supportive. It's overwhelming sometimes. I mean, I looked back after I won, and so many girls are just in tears. And I was just like, this is what it's all about. And I remember there's a moment where they all started chanting my name. And I almost started crying again. Was that
before they announced you as the winner?
That was right after. They all crowded around me, and they're like, Cydney, Cydney. And it's just such a beautiful picture of what we represent, which is, sisterhood and being there for each other.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit, what you said in that interview?
Yeah, so finals night, they asked me how would I empower people during my year. And so my community service initiative, which is basically like a platform, all women within the Miss America opportunity have a community service initiative. But mine just happens to be the power of mentoring, which is all about empowering youth. And so that question just gave me the opportunity to share a little bit of my story about how I grew up with a single mom. My dad left when I was 6, and I grew up the youngest of 3 kids. And I would not be here if it wasn't for my mom placing me in organizations where I had mentors who let me realize that I was more than my circumstances. And they truly empowered me to have the skills and the confidence to do something like Miss Indiana. And so on Saturday night, I said, I'm going to empower youth during my year, not because it's my community service initiative, but because it's my life mission, because of the way I have been empowered. And I remember almost crying, like I was like, don't cry. And people said they could hear it in my voice that I was on the brink, but that's just how personal my response was, because I truly know the value of investing in young people, because people invested in me.
So I've heard you talk a lot in our personal conversations and now about mentoring, and being a mentor. We talk a lot about that on our financial podcast as well, as finding somebody to be your financial mentor. What does that mean to you to be somebody's mentor? What do you look from somebody in a mentor for yourself?
Yeah, so being a mentor, I began mentoring at the age of 19 with my mentee who was 7 at the time. She's 10 now, about to be 11, so she's tall. But it was just an opportunity to share what I've been through in life. And I think a lot of people get intimidated by the word mentor. But I always say we all have a story and we've all been through something in our life that would benefit someone else. And especially for me, when I talk to a lot of kids, I relate to a lot of their experiences, whether it be stage fright. I had a ton of stage fright, whether that be growing up in a single parent home, whether that be growing up with an absent father, whether that be growing up struggling in school. I struggled with my grades all the time. And I've just experienced so many things in my life. And I realize, there are kids who need to realize that none of these are inhibitors to your success in the world. If anything, they contribute to your story and they give you a little bit more grit. And I'm able to share that with the kids that I work with. And then for me, my mentors, not only the ones that I had growing up that empowered me to believe in myself, but the ones that I had throughout college really empowered me to tell my story and to tell it authentically and to tell it with vulnerability. And I took on a lot of leadership roles in college. And my mentors encouraged me to be honest as a leader, but to not shy away from the truth, but to also always be respectful of everyone and everyone's views and what everyone feels and believes in their life, because we're all different. And I think that not only helped me in the Miss Indiana atmosphere, but in the Miss Indiana interview room, I got asked a few polarizing questions, and I always came back to what my mentors told me, which was, we're all unique, we're all different, and we're not all made to have the same point of view. So as an adult, I look for mentors who have well-rounded views of the world. I don't necessarily look for a mentor who thinks and believes the same things as me, but a mentor that has the same values as me is really important.
So Cydney, after your victory or after your win, I was in the crowd and I was talking with a mutual acquaintance of ours who had been there with you on some of your journey. I believe even maybe, did she take that picture?
She took this picture.
She took the picture, that's what I thought.
Yes.
But she had mentioned to me that there was a decision that she had talked to you about and helped you with, which was around you deciding to wear your braids, in the competition. Can you elaborate on that and why that was an important decision for you?
Yeah, so back in March, I just happened to have my braids in on my headshot day with Heather Harkless, who is the photography sponsor for Miss Fort Wayne Northeast. And I was okay with taking pictures that day in my braids. I didn't think I was taking my Miss Indiana headshot. And Heather and my director said, I really like the braids on you. Like, I really think maybe you should wear them at Miss Indiana. And at first I was very hesitant because I've been competing in pageantry for a while, and I definitely had an idea of what the pageantry mold was. And the more I thought on the idea, the more encouragement I got from Heather, Lydia Susan, my director, Kim, my director, Kelsey Garrick, who is also a helper for Fort Wayne Northeast. The more I realized not only the importance of wearing braids for other little girls, but also the importance of showing myself that there's no true pageant mold. There's only the mold that fits you best, and there's only the mold that makes you feel the most beautiful. And for me in my everyday life, I wear braids. This is what when I'm walking down the street and the grocery store, I have braids in my hair. So why would I not win the title of Miss Indiana as the most authentic version of myself? And so wearing the braids was an opportunity to do that, and to also show young girls that you can be yourself, whatever that looks like. Whatever makes you feel the most you is acceptable in the world of pageantry.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know you mentioned before, and some things I've heard as far as doing this for girls that look like you, right? And a lot of our listeners out there are from the inner city community as well. What would you say, to those little girls out there that say, from my background, I can't do this, I can't get into that, or I can't financially afford, to compete, to buy those dresses. How would you talk to those little girls about getting involved in something like this?
Well, one of my goals as Miss Indiana is to make this job and to make this opportunity appear more accessible through being authentic. I do a lot of my interviews with little to no makeup on. I wear my glasses because I have vision issues. I wear my braids, and I think the best way to show these little African American girls that they can do it is to be that representation for them and to not alter myself in any way, shape, or form during my year. And I would let them know that, I was once a girl that said and thought I couldn't do it. And a big reason was because I didn't see anyone who looked like me in a lot of different spaces, whether that was in the volleyball atmosphere, whether that was in pageantry or in the music setting. There was a lack of representation. So I want to be that for young girls because I understand that point of view. I get it, and I've been there and I thought the same thing. But if I can do this job authentically, and if I can do this job as the real Cydney to make this job seem more accessible, then I think I will have done my job at the end of my year.
Awesome. So as Miss Indiana, where do you go from here?
So one of the most exciting opportunities that I never thought I would have was to compete at Miss America. Only 51 women across the state get the opportunity every year to walk the Miss America stage. And we are in, I believe it is our 103rd year of Miss America. And to be able to represent the state on such an amazing platform at the Miss America opportunity is more than I could ever ask for. And I know that I'm not defined by any placement, by any prelim win, by any repostings or standing ovation. I know that I am always going to be defined by Cydney Bridges, child of God, who was blessed with an opportunity to serve her state. And I'm glad I get to do that on the national level as well.
That's awesome. And once again, coming from somebody who doesn't watch this type of stuff, one of the first things Chloe asked me after your win was, can we go to Miss America? I said, well, let's hold on and find out what that entails.
Yes.
Where it's at, what's it cost,
Yes.
Things like that. So we'll look into that. But when is the competition? Do you know yet?
So we know that it's going to be in January, and we know that it's going to be in a warm state. So January, warm state. I will say I went to Miss America last year and watched, and it was an amazing experience. So, and I was 22 at the time, so I can only imagine what it'd be like for a young girl to get to watch Miss America.
And I'm open to doing that. So if you have information
Yes,
or
I will
cost
get it
or
to you.
Discount on tickets for being there, let me know. Definitely interested. But worst case scenario, we'll absolutely be rooting you on from home.
And it'll be streamed.
Yes.
No matter what. So you can always watch wherever you're at in January.
Great. Well, Cydney Bridges, Miss Fort Wayne, Miss Indiana, Cydney Bridges.
Yes.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for being here with us today. I can't tell you how much this has meant to Chloe, myself as well. As I mentioned earlier, I believe you were put in Chloe's life, for a reason. And I don't know how you've changed it yet. Time will tell. But I absolutely know that you have changed her life and direction for the better. So thank you so much for that. And I'm going to put you on the spot here. Once you win Miss America, will you come back and talk with us again?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
If that happens.
Yes, it will, I'm sure. So thank you again for being here.
Thank
Cydney.
you.
Good luck.
I am Cydney Bridges, formerly your Miss Fort Wayne 2020 and your Miss Fort Wayne 2023, but I am now Miss Indiana 2023 as of June 17th. So thank you to my city. You guys have supported me for 3 years. I've served the city in this role for 3 years, and it's just a blessing to be able to now serve the state of Indiana. My mom, Paula Bridges, my brother, Jordan Bridges, Devin Bridges, Natasha McLemore, Haley Bridges, my whole family. You guys are amazing, and I wouldn't be here without you. Also, thank you so much to Neutral Voices for having me. Thank you so much for doing a podcast that's shared with all of Fort Wayne. Keep doing great work. We all appreciate you.
I'm Ryan Leopard, and thank you, Cydney Bridges, Miss Indiana Cydney Bridges, for joining us today at our Neutral Voices.
And I want to thank Cydney for just letting me be on stage with her and stuff. And I also want to have a big shout out to Amari, my new best friend. And I'm just so grateful to be on this set.